Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back again. We are continuing with imperialism. We're moving on here, and we're going to see a little bit different version of imperialism here in Latin America. All right, things work a little bit differently in Latin America versus in Africa and South Asia and Southeast Asia. All right, so let's take a closer look at imperialism in Latin America. Again, we're going to continue on with nationalism and imperialism and how they are leading us into World War I here. So when we talk about imperialism in Latin America, really what we're talking about is what we call economic imperialism. And so what does that mean? That means by the end of the 1800s, the United States and Britain were buying goods from Latin America. By the way, guys, you can see that that's highlighted there. Please highlight that section as well. All right. So what happened here is in the 1800s, they began to invest money in Latin America. And so they invested money as in like factories and building textile mills or ranches or putting money into plantations or mines or building railroads and infrastructure. And that is kind of where we get to this economic imperialism. There was so much money being invested by, in this case, United States and Britain, that the companies were putting money in and they kind of controlled what was happening in those countries because of it. And so all those profits that were being made weren't going to the Latin American company or countries, excuse me, they were going back home to the United States and Britain. And so because of that, there was not a lot of growth going on in Latin America at that time. And so Latin American countries borrowed money from foreign countries to try to make infrastructure improvements in their country. Unfortunately, what happened is because they weren't bringing that much money back into their country, because most of it was going to the United States and Britain, they couldn't always repay their debts. And that then led to foreign countries coming in and trying to force payments with their military. And so that led to this, what we call economic imperialism in Latin America. This idea that they aren't actually controlled as a colony by another foreign power, but economically, they are being controlled by a foreign power. All right. Now, this led to some other issues that we're going to see. One of the issues we have is the Spanish-American War. All right. And so what happens with this is at this time, Cuba revolted. And when they revolted, the revolt was kind of a failure. And what happened here under this, they were trying to gain their independence from Spain at this point. And basically, the United States had put so much money into Cuba at this point that they were worried and that they were going to lose their investments. They were going to lose their money. And those businesses that invested, they were worried. And so what happened with Cuba and their failed revolt is those investors and those companies wanted to see an independent Cuba. So what happens here is during this time, to try to safeguard Cuba from Spain, the United States government decided to send down a warship. They sent down the USS Maine. And that was to guard the harbor, the Havana harbor, to make sure that the U.S. investments were safe. They weren't worried about possible Spanish battle or war happening here. And so the USS Maine was sent down to guard those U.S. investments, the economic investments. All of a sudden, what happened is the USS Maine was blown up out of nowhere. It wasn't under siege. Nothing happened. All of a sudden, it just blows up. And what happened is the United States government and the Navy suspected that it was the Spanish. And so in the year 1898, the United States declared war against Spain. All right, now we don't know what actually happened to the USS Maine. It's most likely it was not the Spanish that did it, but it happened. And so we declared war against Spain in 1898. All right, fairly quick war. What eventually happened is a peace treaty. And in that peace treaty, Spain ended up losing. So they ended up giving Cuba to the United States, and they also gave Puerto Rico to the United States. In addition to that, Spain also lost the Philippines and Guam, which will eventually become United States territories as well. So the U.S. control of Cuba lasted for about 2 years. And at the end of those 2 years, the United States decided that they needed to establish a constitution for Cuba so they could gain their independence and give power back to the Cubans. And that's exactly what happened. The one thing the United States did was we maintained a military base in Cuba that was called Guantanamo Bay. Guantanamo Bay is still there today. In fact, for a while, it was being used to detain terrorists, international terrorists that the United States had captured. That's kind of been closed. It's kind of still open, but we still have a base, a military base in Cuba at Guantanamo Bay today. And so the U.S. and Latin America have this kind of interesting relationship. one of the things that we see that becomes really important is the building of the Panama Canal. And so the United States really wanted a way to be able to cut down traffic or time travel, not time travel, travel time, excuse me, between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. If you don't have the canal there, you can see the red line. You have to go all the way around South America to get from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States. When we build the canal or start to build that canal in the year 1914, we continue on something that the French had already started. And so we go in and continue to help build that canal so we can cut down travel time. It's actually a national defense issue, right? Being able to get our Navy from the East Coast to the West Coast quicker. And so that's exactly what we do. We helped to build that canal. Ever since the canal has been built, the United States had maintained a presence to kind of a U.S. military presence to protect that canal area. We want to keep it open for all shipping, not just for us, but for the world. This also led to something called the Roosevelt Corollary, and that was at the time the president Teddy Roosevelt basically said that the United States will give aid to any country in the Western Hemisphere if their independence is threatened. In addition to that, the United States will also force any Latin American countries to repay their debts to foreign countries. That really upset Latin American countries, largely because why should the United States try to force them to do something in their country, right? They are sovereign. The United States has no power over those countries. All right, so that really upset a lot of Latin American countries at this time. So that's why I say this is kind of an interesting relationship between the U.S. and the rest of Latin America. Another place that we see the issue of imperialism kind of come to a head is in Mexico. Mexico goes through another revolution here. They had already gained their independence, but they essentially were sort of still foreign controlled. We know they gained independence from Spain in the 1800s, but at this point, they're basically being controlled by a dictatorship. And that dictatorship has given companies, foreign companies, the ability to come into Mexico and take resources. And so specifically oil. So American and British companies have come into Mexico, taken resources, taken wealth, and taken land from the people. And a lot of people, most people in Mexico at this time were poor. They had no land. And so they wanted land reform. They wanted change. They wanted to overthrow this dictatorship. And so that's what leads to the revolt of 1910. Those two men right there in the top picture that are sitting down, those are the two leaders of two different militaries that come together here. They're peasant-led militaries. They're led by these two men. It was Emilio Zapata on the left and Pancho Villa on the right. And they were trying to overthrow the man right there, the dictator Victoriano Huerta. All right, trying to get him out of power because they wanted the power of, or they wanted the control of Mexico out of foreign control, like the resources, back to the people of Mexico. All right. So here's our last thing, guys, is we're looking at is make sure, again, you don't need to answer this question, but make sure that you can answer the question. How did American imperialism in Latin America differ from that of Europe? All right. How did European imperialism look in Africa and South America, in Africa, South Asia, East Asia, and Southeast Asia versus what it looked like here in Latin America? Okay. So be able to answer that question. And as always, if you have questions, guys, feel free to get in touch with your teacher. Have a good one, and we'll see you again soon.